If you don't know it, that's my family there. It was a Christmas picture that was taken in Davenport, Iowa, in our backyard. It was like one of our favorite things. I think we might have even walked to church that day. It's our backyard. We are filling our sanctuary for this Advent series with pictures, family pictures of Christmas past throughout the generations. And we're inviting families that are going to be lighting that Advent candle to kind of freewheel that, to tell us what are the traditions that have been passed on to them from generation to generation, and who are the saints that were the people that passed those on to you as we walk through that. So invite you to be thinking of those kind of things. Most of us, when we think of Christmas, we have a memory of a tradition forged in our minds from childhood. And this memory, at least for me, became the holiest of holy practices for how Christmas should be celebrated. Well, Christmas is for everyone. The best Christmases involve children. No Christmas morning can compete with the magic of those first Christmases of my childhood, sitting on the top of the stairs, waiting for my parents to wake up and get things in order before we could come down and see the lights and the shiny wrapping paper and the presents. My parents were reluctant to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, the appropriate time. We were up at 4. We waited an hour for them to get there. So we would jump on their bed and on them to gently encourage their participation at that time of the day. Then the frenzy would begin, my father desperately trying to maintain order as we gathered around the presents like a pack of hungry lions chasing down a wounded buffalo on the Serengeti. But stop. We're not there yet. We're not at Christmas, but leading up to it. The thing that makes Christmas Christmas is more than the day. It is all the lead up to the day, the preparation, the anticipation, the waiting. Advent, both in spiritual and secular terms, is the build up to Christmas. In the church, Advent is the beginning of the church year. We hear the prophecies of hope, peace, joy, love, in anticipation of the embodiment of those promises in the birth of Jesus Christ, Emmanuel, God with us. But pastors like myself are not foolish. Advent is also a time of preparation in the secular culture and in our homes for the big Christmas party. The theme this year is for our Advent and Christmas celebration is from generation to generation. And we're going to spend time thinking about the traditions passed on to us. All the time remembering we are also shaped by prophecies that were passed on to us by the saints of faith. And we are the stewards who will pass them on to future generations so that they will know hope, peace, joy, and love as a living reality that exists long after Christmas is over. This next picture, that's me in the white, and I'm rocking that white. I'm a proud member of the Sears catalog generation. If you know what I mean, you know what I mean. And it's not really different for this generation. This generation's Sears catalog is called Amazon. They don't have a paper catalog. They just scanned the internet for these things. That catalog was about 1.5 inches thick, and it had everything you could imagine, toys galore. And you would go through that magazine and you would find the pages of the things that you liked, and you would bend the corner of that page knowing Santa would be looking at those pages. And if they didn't get the hint, Santa didn't get a hit, you would take a pencil or a marker or something and draw a big circle around what you really wanted to have. And there are very few presents that remain in my memory. I remember the excitement of opening, playing with, and enjoying presents, but not exactly what I was ever given. I've got ideas. There's one present I clearly remember. It was this big aircraft carrier thing that I got to play with. But what I remember most is the rhythm of the season. My mother spending hours baking cookies and getting chased out of the kitchen when we tried to sneak cookie dough. The famous one of those is when we lived in Buffalo, New York, and my mom got mad at us because my brother and I were stealing so much cookie dough that she just took a broom and chased us outside and closed the door. Only then she realized we were in our pajamas and it was snowing outside, and she reluctantly let us back in, but we learned the lesson. The frenzy of preparation, Christmas Day, Eve day. My mom would spend hours putting together a smorgasbord, and we called it that. It was the smorgasbord. She would fill the dining room table with so much food that you couldn't sit there and dine at it. There were hams, cheesy potatoes, water chestnuts wrapped with bacon and dipped in barbecue sauce. You had 3 kinds of Jell-O, which was just magical for me. You had Grandma Elkin's lefse. My mom made rosettes and sprinkled them with powdered sugar. There were meatballs and barbecue sauce. The famous green bean casserole with those dried onions on top. Fanny Farmer mince. And my grandmother Nana's homemade caramels wrapped in wax paper, which Marcia does a very good job of duplicating. Just saying. It was such a glorious break from the hamburger helper of the regular work week. We were not allowed to touch anything on that table until dinner, and dinner never really happened until 9 o'clock, and I think my mom made a soup to hold us off. But at 9 o'clock, we went upstairs and we got dressed in the nicest clothes that we could have, and we came downstairs and we enjoyed the smorgasbord. We'd sit around in the living room with the plates on our lap, looking at that Christmas tree with presents from relatives, and we spoke of things that we were thankful for. There was no conflict as we sat around that tree. When dinner was over, we quickly cleaned up, put away what needed to be refrigerated, and then we left for church. And we always went to the last church service. It was always at 11 o'clock service that ended with the candle lights. We never got home and settled till about 1 o'clock in the morning. Maybe that's why my mom and dad didn't want to wake up at 4. I don't know. But I loved the preparation, even though I had nothing to do with it. I love the anticipation, I love the ritual, and I love the peace of that evening. My Christmas memories, the one I cherish, are all good. But I do have more Christmas memories that were not good, more than I care to admit. Actually, I do admit it all the time. I got to complaining about Christmas so much one time that my family said, "You need to stop. We like this season." The peace of that Christmas Eve meal got pushed to the side by family arguments on both sides of the family, fighting over how much you spent on a present, and you only argue over how much you spent when someone is not spending enough. There were arguments about where you were and where you were spending their time, and you don't come and visit us enough. And then there were angry words, and arguments so easily destroyed everything good. When you think about it, though, those are all self-inflicted wounds. Our bad Christmases were all self-inflicted wounds, but not all bad Christmases experienced are self-inflicted. Those Christmases where life feels like it's coming apart at the seams. We don't like to think of those years for good reason. They're too painful. Going through the motions of joy, trying to have hope when you've lost a job or a spouse or a parent, or there's just not enough money for a good Christmas. In those years, hope is all you have. The hope is that the bad times will come to end and good things will abound once more. If this resonates with your life and your history of Christmas past, then you are in a position to really understand what Isaiah is writing about in his prophecy. In the days to come. More appropriately stated in the message is, there is a day surely coming. As theologian Joel Kemp points out, some translations will say in those last days, but there's nothing in the Hebrew that suggests we must wait for end times, for despair to turn to peace. The prophet sees and shares with his community a promise that there will be a future that contradicts the people's present realities of despair. When life seems at its darkest points, we need to hear this kind of promise over and over again, even when we don't believe it. The repetition of hearing it helps us endure and discover hope has the power to reshape our present reality. Even when times are good, we need to hear these words spoken to us, so that when our fortunes turn for the worst, we see it as a season and not a permanent reality. In a way, Advent and the preparation of Christmas is a ritual that helps remind us a day is surely coming. This promise was spoken by soldiers who spent their Christmas in a trench in Europe. It was spoken by our ancestors hovering over the edge of despair during the Depression. This promise held our ancestors in hope, and it will for us as well. The prophet Isaiah saw a way to connect despair of the present reality of his position to peace that was to come. And that vision he saw was within power for everyone who heard or read his words. He said to those people in despair, "Come, let's go to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of Jacob, so that he may teach us God's ways and we can walk in God's paths." The path to peace is the hope that comes when the day comes that we can go up the mountain and allow God to teach us once again how to live as the people of God. You know, sometimes that law of God or walking with God is presented as some great burden to bear. Perhaps because faith is so often presented not in terms of laws, but infractions, a ploy used to make some feel better than others. Or we make the climb to the holy seem so steep and difficult. But walking in the ways of God, we're not meant to be those things. The path God desires us to walk is in hope that peace will come. Will bring every heart along the way to joy and love. When I think of every bad Christmas experience, we all had the power to turn those experiences from bad to good simply by remembering the path God called us to walk. Watched a fascinating video of Steven Spielberg talking about the making of Schindler's List, the deeply accurate and emotional movie he made about the Holocaust. And I never thought about it in these terms. As a Jewish director, Spielberg recreated one of the worst histories of the Jewish people. He recreated gas chambers. He recreated Nazi aggression against his people. He was filming this thing on and reliving the deepest wound. And as the filming started to progress, the weight started to become unbearable. He actually had Robin Williams call him up with jokes every day to lighten the load. He even found talking to actors dressed in their Nazi uniforms horrifying. And the emotional toll was being experienced by everyone, Jew and Gentile, on the set. Locals in Krakow, Poland were painting swastikas near the set. Then Spielberg had an idea. 1 month into filming, during the Passover, he invited the entire cast to a Seder meal at the hotel in Krakow, Poland. And they were joined by Jewish and German actors alike. And in an interview, Spielberg told the Hollywood Foreign Press these words: "Everybody who plays a Nazi in Schindler's List is a German actor, except for one who was Polish. And we had an amazing experience in Poland when all the German actors came to the Passover Seder in Krakow. They put on yarmulkes. They sat there with prayer books. The Haggadahs opened up before them. And the Israeli actors moved their chairs next to the German actors. It was never the same after that for me. It was all very good between us. Some kind of closure happened that day, and I wept, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing." That is exactly what Isaiah meant by going up to the mountain of God to be taught by how to walk in the paths of God. The hope that out of every conflict, a path of peace and joy may be found. The climb up the mountain in the reading sets the table for one of my favorite verses in all of Scripture. And the words are engraved on a wall across the street from the UN, a wall dedicated to an African-American diplomat named Ralph Bunche, who helped solve conflicts across the globe. They are the words of Isaiah, which were Ralph Bunche's favorite words. They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. When I think of these things, how I wish the leaders of the nations around the world could read them today and trust the truth they share. These words of Isaiah must have been the favorite words of a lesser prophet, Micah, because Micah puts these in the opening of the 4th chapter. These are almost word for word the words of Micah in that book, with one exception. With one exception. Micah added this outcome. They shall all sit under their own vines and under their own fig trees, and no one shall make them afraid. Former president and founder in general, George Washington, found hope in these words. If you're watching the Ken Burns series on the Revolutionary War, you'll come to understand that almost all of George Washington's life was consumed with war. From the very first moment he came to this country, and he inflicted a war on people, and others inflicted war upon him. He lived a very difficult life until he found Mount Vernon. And after he had gotten out of public life, every single letter he wrote to people said, I have found my fig and vine tree to rest under. When these words are words from our ancestors that have been passed on to us. And what have they told us in sharing this? Whether it is in your heart or your home, at work or in your community, in politics, ethics, or between nations, hope is embracing there's alternatives to how we live with each other. We can choose swords, or we can beat those swords into plowshares and give every heart, home, and community a vine and fig tree to dwell under in peace and unafraid. We might not make that choice today on our own, but a day is surely coming when we will. When we get exhausted with constant conflict and discover that walking in hatred is a greater burden than climbing the mountain of the Lord to live in God's path. Amen.